Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So, in the last class, we were studying that portion of the Vivekachudamani where we find that in answer to the question, what is the self? The teacher has started giving a deliberation, giving an explanation of what is the self. So in the last class, we studied the 125th, 126th, 127th and the 128th verse of the Vivekachudamani. And in the 125th verse, we found that the teacher is enunciating the self as the witness. That behind all our activities, behind all our thoughts, feelings, emotions, we find there is a witness. I know that I am seeing, I know that I am hearing, I know that I am touching, I know that I am smelling, I know that I am tasting. So all these five senses. When I am perceiving, I know I am the one who is behind all those perceptions. So I am the eye of the eye. That in Kena Upanishad that word will come. Ear of the ear. I am the test of the test. So like that, of all the five senses, behind that someone is there who is witnessing. Not only the perceptions, even all the activities, whatever activities we are doing. I know that I am acting as if I am the witness behind all my activities, behind all my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings. Everywhere I find that there is a witness. So that witness has been enunciated as the self. The self as the witness was enunciated in the 125th verse. And in the 126th verse it was mentioned that the self is omniscient. He knows everything. The one who is witnessing everything, obviously he is the knower of all the activities, of all the thoughts, of all the feelings, of all our emotions. So he is there, knowing everything. He knows the three states of existence, the deep sleep, the dream state and the waking state. As we were saying, that unless there is a witness, unless there is a knower behind the three states, it is very difficult to explain the memory. That as we know that I was in sleep, I was in deep sleep, and when I was in deep sleep, I knew nothing. That this, when I am awake, this memory is there. So what it speaks of, that example which we gave, that suppose in a room, a person enters, say a person named A enters, say for some time, for half an hour. And he is doing certain activities, most probably he is meditating. He leaves. For the next half hour, no one is there. Then again the B comes, a person called B comes, and most probably now he is singing some devotional songs, and then again he leaves. Unless there is one who is witnessing all the activities, say C, who was there all around in the room witnessing what's going on, how can we relate all the activities? That someone was there who was meditating, then no one was there, and again there was someone who was singing, how can we know? So with this example we are trying to say that in wakeful state we have particular type of activities. We know that. When again we are in deep sleep, there is no activities. We know that. And again in the dream state, the experiences are totally different from the experiences of the waking state. That experiences are different. The activities of the mind are different. But I know that I have dreamt such and such thing. So this speaks of someone who is witnessing all the states of our existence, and naturally the self is the one who is the witness, and as he is witnessing everything, He is the omniscient being. So that was indicated in the 126th verse. And then he is not just witnessing. It is his light by which everything is illumined. So that is, the self is the only luminous entity that was indicated in the 127th and in the 128th verse. That by his light everything is lighted. It is the light of the self, not the sun. It is the self. Even the sun gives us light. This we can know because it is the self which is illuminating the entire universe, including the sun. So this is the idea which we found was indicated in the 127th and in the 128th verse. So now there are other aspects, not aspects, I would say from other perspectives, again, we can define the self, we can explain the self. So all those perspectives now will be taken one after the other to explain the existence of the self, to explain the self which is behind this body-mind complex. So now we will proceed to the 129th verse. So here it is indicated that self is the master of the body-mind complex. He is the master. Because of him, everything, because of his command, by his command, whatever is going on in the body-mind complex, they are as if obeying the master, the self. So self is the master. All the bodily activities which are going on are just by the command of that master. So that's the idea which has been indicated in the 129th verse. So what it is saying? Yasya sannidhi matrena dehendriya manodhiya vishayeshu swakiyeshu vartante prerita iva. So he is a master. But this master is such that he doesn't have to deliver the command. He doesn't have to deliver. You will find that when really a person who has tremendous authority, tremendous power over his subjects, if a king has a tremendous power, by his mere presence, just by seeing him, everyone will be doing their respective duties. No one has to say them. And that's the idea which is being enunciated here, that it is not that he is really commanding. Just by his mere presence, all the activities are going on without any regression, without any disobedience, as if just what they have to do, they are doing. So yasya sannidhi matrena, just by very mere presence, what happens? Dehendriya manodhiya, deha indriya mana. So our body, our senses, our mind, what they are doing? Vishayeshu swakiyeshu vartante prerita iva. Just like servant, prerita is a servant. Just like the servant, they are all doing their respective duties in the sphere of actions. So in the respective sphere of action, whatever they have to do, they are doing. Visveshu swakiyeshu. Swakiyeshu means whatever is their responsibility, they are doing. That vishaya, that's the subject which they are doing, just like a servant. So this is the idea which we find, with which the Kena Upanishad starts. And the Kena Upanishad starts with that question, that profound question, which is asked by the student to the teacher, that what's that? Kene shitam preshitam, kene shitam patati preshitam mana, kena prana prathama praiti yuktah, kene shitang vacham imang vadanti chakshu srotra kau deva yunakti. That by whom, willed by whom, directed by whom does the mind light on its subject? That we feel that it is the mind which is illumining the so-called the universe. But here the question is, who is behind the mind? Who is directing the mind to illumine all the things which see? There is a mind light on its subjects. By whom, by whose command does the prana, the vitality, the vital forces, they are performing their respective functions? By whose will do we speak? That's the speech. And what intelligence directs the eyes, the ears? all the senses, by eyes and ears, all the senses are indicated. So it's all the activities there which are going on, by whose will, by whose direction. And in the very second verse, it is very nicely it's mentioned. Because the self being the eternal subject, I cannot point it and just say that is the self. The subject can never be known. Once I know the subject, it becomes an object. And that way it will lead to infinite regression. That yes, there's behind the self, there is another self, behind the self, another self. There won't be any end to it. So what the scripture is saying, in the very second mantra of the Kena Upanishad, the answer very nicely is being delivered. What's the answer? Srotrasya srotram. Manaso mano. Yat vacha. Vacham. Sahu pranasya prana. Chakshu chakshu. Atimuchya dhira. Pratyasman lokat amrita bhavanti. He becomes immortal. Who knows it is not the eyes, not the ears, not the mind that are functioning by itself. There is someone who is behind the ear, the ear of the ear, mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the vitality behind the vital forces. The one who knows that, he can transcend the cycle of birth and death. Hence he becomes Amrita. There is no death for him because he has known the essence of behind the entire existence. He has realized the self. So that's the idea, that the self is the one who is the master behind all the activities. As we will find, Sri Ramakrishna in a very simple words is to explain this. That is to say that suppose in a container, in a pot, in a cauldron, the water is boiling and there are some potatoes in that. The potatoes are boiling in that boiled water. And a small child looks at it and finds the potatoes are jumping. Now anything moving gives us the impression that it is most probably something living. So the child shouts out, "Mother, mother, the potatoes are living. See, they are all jumping around. They are having life." And what the mother does, just removes the cauldron from the oven. And immediately all the jumping stops. So it is the fire which is the cause of all the movements that we see. The boiling water, the potato, which is all jumping, the vegetables which are jumping in the water. It is all because they are all energized by the heat of the oven. You remove the heat, all the jumping stops. It's very interesting. In science, we find that the idea that there is a conscious principle behind the existence is sometimes denied, and even if it's not denied, they say that it is beyond the purview of our study. We are not bothered about it. But even in science, when you go on with your research faithfully, a time comes that quick question mark comes. You have to ask that question. There is no other way. Even Stephen Hawking, who never believed in the existence of God or whatsoever, he is an acclaimed atheist. He never believed in behind the exact. In fact, he got divorced because of that. It was not because of his that he was handicapped because of his disease that his separation happened. It happened because his wife was a believer, and he being not a believer. So naturally they couldn't match up properly. In course of time there was a separation. So we need not relate to that private life. What's the thing we are saying? That he was an acclaimed atheist. But even in the end of his life, a very nice question is asking, which is almost similar to that example which Sri Ramakrishna is giving. What Stephen Hawking is saying, that throughout the universe we find we find the laws are universal. That the law of gravitation. So as we know, the same gravitation works throughout the universe. So that's why we can precisely calculate the force with which a rocket has to be ejected in what direction, so that it can go and it can reach the moon and do a soft landing on the moon. What to speak of moon, even on the Mars? Why? We know the laws are universal. There's an equation working behind all those forces. Now, it's even in science that question at last will come. How can these all mathematically precise equations are working universally throughout the world? That's when there is no consciousness behind the existence, it is supposed to be chaotic. Just the way you look at the clouds, what the shape will be, we don't know. As per the blowing of the wind or whatever it may be, as per the difference of the pressure, the layers of the cloud constantly are going on change. They go on changing. The shapes go on changing. They take all various patterns. Those are patterns which are unpredictable. It speaks of as if there is no consciousness behind it. When we find that consciousness, when everything as if can be worked out in rhythm, so then the question of some consciousness comes into picture. So now here Stephen Hawking, the question he's asking is very interesting. That who fuels the equations? The entire universe, there is a wonderful rhythm. As in the Vedanta it was mentioned, that when the ultimate reality, the Brahman, the conscious principle, it finds expression as the universe. The universe is nothing but energy, Shakti. That Shakti is not chaotic. It finds expression as uniform laws. The three Vachakas for these three evolutes, the three evolutes of the ultimate reality. That the ultimate conscious principle finds expression as energy, and that energy is again not chaotic. It finds expression as rhythm. Has been used, the three Vachakas has been used to express these three. What are they? Om, Rim, Ritam. Om is the ultimate reality. It finds expression as the Shakti, the energy, Rim, and that Rim again is not chaotic. It finds expression as Ritam, as the universal laws which we see in the entire world, whether it's physical or it's moral. You'll find that we are all bound to follow certain laws. So, very interesting, that word, from that word rhythm, you find it so similar to the English word rhythm. It has been derived from that. Rhythm speaks of laws, sequence, something balanced. So that's the thing which even in our scriptures we find is indicated. Now the question comes, if there is no consciousness, how can you get the rhythm? Wherever you see rhythm, that speaks of the truth. That's why rhythm, which means rhythm, in Sanskrit has been translated as Satyam. That is the truth. I cannot transcend it. The ultimate reality finds expression as rhythm. So, how it is possible? Because there is a conscious principle by whose presence everything is working, just as per the responsibilities given to them, as if the responsibility is given to them, accordingly they are working. No one deviates from that by the mere presence. So that's the idea which has been spoken of in the 129th verse, that the self is the master of this body-mind complex. And then in the 130th verse, what it will be speaking, this principle which is distinct from the body and all the organ, that is the Atman, whose very nature is consciousness, and that is the one who knows everything. So that the same idea is being reiterated here, that he is the knower of everything. What is being mentioned? Ahankaradi dehanta. This is the 130th verse. Ahankaradi dehanta vishayascha sukhadaya vedyante ghatavat yena nitya bodha swarupina. So from ahankara, so that our body-mind complex evolves from ego. That example which we give again and again, that the conscious principle, the moment it is reflected in the body-mind complex, the ego is generated. The ego is generated. And from that ego, all the evolution starts. That first the body-mind complex may be in a very, very preliminary form. And then once the consciousness is reflected, the ego is generated, ahankara, then the body-mind complex starts evolving. Why it starts evolving? That example which we gave again and again. That suppose I am standing in front of a mountain and I shout my own name, and the name is echoed from the mountain, and I get deluded. I think someone is calling me from the mountains. The same thing happens here. The self, as if in the presence of the body-mind complex, is constantly asserting the fact that I am eternal. I am ever fulfilled. There is no want for me, no need. I am fulfilled. I am eternal. I exist by my own right. And this, when it is asserting this thing in presence of this body-mind complex, as if these assertions are echoed back. And the self gets deluded. It thinks as if the body-mind complex is saying, I am eternal, I am ever fulfilled. And now the contradiction comes. That something within is saying, I am eternal, I am ever fulfilled. There is no want, I am behind all wants and needs. And I feel that if I don't have something to eat that will degenerate my body, some food will nourish me, some toxin will kill me. It is contradicting what I hear. Now, to realize what I hear, all the attempt to realize the words which I am hearing from within, that starts. How it starts? Now the single cellular organism, it will start fighting with the nature. The nature says you are supposed to die. I say, no, I want to exist. And then all the stimuli behind which it cannot exist, it tries to transcend that. There's a little more heat will kill it, a little less temperature will kill it. So how to cope up much better with nature? The cells, this unicellular organism starts as if conglomerating. They start having division of labor. That you take care of the respiration, you take care of the digestion, you take care of the circulation, so that we all together can fight with the nature in a much better way, so that we can realize the echo which we are hearing constantly. And that's how the evolution is happening. The evolution starts because of that ignorance, that I am deluded by the echo, and the evolution starts. And the apex of the evolution is the human being. See, from that ahankara, all deha, the entire, all the various beings, everything came from that. Ahankara, the deha paryant, everything came, the human being. As a human being, we have that unique faculty to realize the fact, in this entire process of evolution, which happened because of delusion, there is no need for me to realize the eternity which is being echoed from the core of my being, to realize the sense of fulfillment which is echoed from the core of my being. I am already that. Because of my false identification with the body-mind complex, I am again and again getting deluded, and because of the delusion, the entire biological evolution has happened, resulting in this complex body-mind complex. So now I have realized what? That I am not that. Behind that someone is there who is, because of whom this everything is existing, is possible. So now you will understand what he's saying. Ahankaradi dehanta. From ahankara to all this body-mind complex, deha anta. Starting from vishayascha, sukhadaya. And the feeling that whenever I am trying my best to fight with the nature, all the little successes we have, a little small desire is there. The moment it is fulfilled, I immediately get some happiness. So here it is saying very nicely that Vedyante, actually it is the self who is seeing all those things without really getting involved. Just when I hear the echo, am I really getting involved with that mountains? Nothing. The mountain is in its own place. In no way it is affecting me. My voice is being echoed back. I am as if standing in front of the mountain, and when the delusion falls off, when I realize that it is just the echo, then there is no question of suffering. then I just become a witness. What type of witness? Even this body-mind complex with which I was identifying myself, that identification falls off. Now, if at present, if I am standing here and there is a pot, there is a jar in front of me, I know that that is a jar which is an object which is not me. It is something separate from me. So here very nicely the sloka Sankaracharya, Bhagavat Pada Shankaracharya is saying what? Ghatavat yena. Just like the jar, just like that pot. This entire body-mind complex is just like that pot. All the feelings of happiness, pain, pleasure, sorrow, whatever it may be, sukha daya, sukha adi, means not only happiness, all sorts of feelings, all emotions, all thoughts, everything is considered as sukha daya. All these things are something which is something not me. It is just like a ghata. When I see a pot, I know it is something separate from me. Here, once I realize that I am the self, it is because of the delusion, the identification happened. In reality, I am in no way identified with that. So now that becomes the object, the real me becomes the subject. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when you are realized, you become like a ripened coconut, a unripe coconut. You will find it is impossible to separate the shell from the kernel. They are all intertwined. How to know that the coconut has ripened? You take a ripe coconut in your hand and shake it. You will find that the shell has got separated from the kernel. So that's the sign of realization. So the one who knows the self has again realized the self. He knows this body-mind complex is in no way related to him, that there is no identity between him and the body-mind complex. It is something just as separate, as objective, just like a pot, like a jar. I have no sense of identification with that. I know it because what's going on there, because I am the witness, but I am not a part of it. I transcend that. So that's the idea of Vedyante Ghatavat Yena Nitya Bodha Swarupina. As a always, there's the underlying, the essence of that eternal knowledge. I am always there, just witnessing it. In the entire process of evolution, whatever has happened, I was never actually part of it. The real me was always witnessing it. It was because of ignorance I thought it is a part of me. But really I was never identified with that. I was always just the witness. So, the more that we evolve spiritually, what we do? That our vichara starts. We take one by one the various layers of our identification with the body-mind complex to negate it. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that if you start peeling off the onion, you peel off, layers after layer fall off. And at last what you find? There's nothing. In essence, as if there is no layer. What it indicates? It indicates the Pancha Kosha, that various layers of our existence. That sometimes we feel I am the body-mind complex. By vichara we find that no, I am not that. I am not this body-mind complex, because that I have a sense of eternity. But this body will decay. It is going through this Shara Vikara, 6 types of changes. It was born, it is going to die. How can the one who is echoing that you are eternal be the body-mind complex? It doesn't tally. I am not the prana, because prana is constantly changing. Sometimes I am very energetic. Sometimes I find that I am very weak, exhausted, sick. So I cannot be the vitality. Similarly, I cannot be the mind, which is constantly it's fluctuating. It's just thought to thought it is jumping. It cannot be the intelligence, the buddhi, the determinative faculty. Neither it can be the Anandamaya Kosha, the state when I am in the deep sleep. I have that sukha, sense of that bliss and happiness. And sometimes I think most probably that is the real me. But the scripture again is saying that is the Anandamaya Kosha. It is not the real you. It is the mind with all its samskaras still there, but they are just not finding expression. that when I am awake, each and every chitta vritti has a content. That content speaks of the knowledge. So when the chitta vritti has the content of a jar, I know it's a jar. When it has the content of a flower, I know it's a flower. But the vrittis are there, but it has no content. That's the state of the deep sleep. But still, the chitta is there, the vrittis are there. So even that karana sharira is not me. So gradually, when I go from the body one by one, as if I'm just going to the inner layers of my identification, I negate to find the self at last. Sri Ramakrishna, in a very simple way, is giving a nice allegory that a person went to meet the Maharaja, the king, the royal, the grand royal, the king of the kingdom. And the moment he went to the outer gate, seeing the security, he was confused. He thought he is the king because he was having he was dressed very nicely. He had a turban in his head. He was very well adorned. Even he had some ornaments. So he thought he is the king. He was confused. And then he was directed to go still to the inner chamber. He went to the inner chamber. Again, there was another gate. Seeing the gatekeeper there, the doorkeeper, again he was confused. Again he was directed to go inward. And at last, when he went to the inner chamber where the king was sitting, now there was no more confusion. There was no need for seeing the splendor, the grand splendor. Now he understood there was no need to ask anyone whether he is the king or not. He knew he is the king of the kings. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna is saying that as we, through vichara, go into the inner core of our being, gradually to find out the real, the me, the essence of our existence, the conscious principle, as the royal being, as the Maharaja sitting there. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna, with the help of allegory, is trying to explain that ahankara didihanta, all these identifications which we have are wrong. The more you go within, at last you find the self sitting there resplendent, just in its basking in its own glory. So that's the idea, so which we find in this sloka. So in the modern materialistic philosophy, we find that when they say that man is a very sophisticated machine, it's very difficult to really live a life with this idea. We find that it leads to a type of hollowness, emptiness. They call it existential crisis. That what's the need for that existence if it's just a machine? All those there were many philosophers who propounded this idea of existentialism, and many of them committed suicide, because if I'm just a machine, there is no purpose of life. It is just a machine, self-operated machine. What's the use of life? It loses its purpose. So that's why we find that the Vedanta is asserting the fact that yes, of course, my body-mind complex is a very sophisticated machine, but there is an operator. That I'm not denying that this is a machine. It's of course a wonderful machine, but there is an operator behind it who is sitting behind, because of whom this machine is working perfectly. And the one who is sitting within, as the one who, by his mere presence, everything is working wonderfully, he is that. That's the scripture. The Vedanta is asserting, Tattvamasi, you are that. So that's the thing which has been indicated by this verse. So the Atman is the eternal self. It is the innermost reality. Its light percolates through the subtle ego to the gross body and the external world. So this again will be stated in the next verse. The same idea. Just he is expounding. What he is saying? Esha antaratma purusha purana nirantara akhanda sukhanubhuti sada eka rupa pratibodha matraha yena ishita vak asava charanti. So this again, the same idea is reiterated. What is he saying? That this is the innermost self, antaratma. As we said, the word atma literally means something within. Compared to the external world, deha is atma. Compared to the body, the mind is the atma. And again, relative to the mind, the self is the atma. That is the ultimate thing which is within. That's why it is called Antaratma, the innermost self. Instead of just saying Atma, the word Antaratma is used, the innermost self. As the word Atma means something within, so that's why the Antaratma is used to indicate the self, the conscious principle. So this Esha Antaratma, this self, is Purusha Purana, is the ancient being. That we have an idea that it was that with the birth, with our birth, we are born. With our death, we are annihilated. And this me is constantly changing. Is it fact? No. Does anyone feel that the one who as a child was a different person than as a grown-up person? Is the same me who was a child, is the same me who is now old, who is going to just still become older, and then degeneration happens, death comes. But all that, behind all this, the idea that I am the one who is the same person, does anyone has some contradictory idea than that? Does anyone feel I am not the same? If it is a flow, if it is just a constant flow, then there is no question of having the idea of that identity, that I am the same person who was child, who was infant, who was a young youth, who is now a middle-aged person, and then it is the same person who is going to get old and then at last die. That behind all the changes, the idea that someone is there eternally, this idea wouldn't have been there. So that's why the scripture is saying that the real me who is the witnessing all these changes is the Purana Purusha. This Purana word is very interesting. Pura api navaiva, that the one who is existing as the eternal witness, for him there is no change. Though he is ancient, but he is always new. Pura api navaiva, ever aging, never old. He is in the eternal present, no transformation. A question of time comes when there is transformation. As there is no transformation, he is in the ever eternal present. So that's the idea, this eternal present. This idea is being indicated as Purana Purusha, Purusha Purana. Nirantara Akhanda Sukhanubhuti. It is in the perpetual state of bliss. See, these are all negations of the limited idea. That here, first they are saying Purana Purusha. With that, the idea that I am born at certain point of time, I am going to die at certain, that is denied. And then Nirantara Akhanda Sukhanubhuti. What it speaks? In our life we find that always there is a polarity working. Sometimes I am happy, sometimes I am unhappy. Sometimes I am ecstatic, sometimes I am in abject misery. So these polarities are there. And sometimes, and most of the time we find that happiness is very momentary. The suffering is something which continues. Then how can I say that I am the one who is in that, having that perpetual bliss, unending perpetual bliss? How can I say that? The scripture is saying that that we have indicated again and again, that in this life, as we are within the bound of Maya, because of ignorance, what is happening? We think that we have lot of limitations, and to go beyond the limitations, I have to extend my hand, I have to grab the things out there, lying out there. I have to get the things. This is my desire. What, from where the desire comes from? That desire comes from unfulfillment. There are so many things are there which is limiting my existence. I want that. I don't have it. And so constantly we are chasing after all those desires. When I am chasing after the desires, it is all suffering. It's not something a very pleasant sensation. But the moment the desire is fulfilled, immediately I go to that apex of ecstasy. Tremendous happiness. And again it starts falling flat. So this polarity is going on. So how come the question of perpetual happiness comes? So to explain that, Swamiji's allegory, we have resorted so many times. Again, let us explain that. The Swamiji is saying that it is not the fulfillment of desires that gives us happiness. Happiness comes from desirelessness. That when the desires are there in my mind is turbulent. that turbulent mind becomes the filtering factor for the perpetual bliss which is already there. Just like a lake which has lot of waves, the water is turbulent. I cannot see the bottom of the lake when the water is turbulent. It is breaking into waves. It is turbulent. I cannot see the bottom. If the water is calm, transparent, then I can as if see the bottom of the lake. Swami is saying our mind is just like the lake, and the real me, the self, is as if the bottom, the innermost core, the bottom of the lake. And when the lake is full of waves, that speaks of all the worries and tensions, the wants, the desires, which is tormenting my mind. So that's why that is filtering the bliss factor which is in the bottom. I cannot see it because all the disturbances are there. When a desire, intense desire is fulfilled, for the time being the mind is calm, and immediately the bottom is visible. That's the perpetual bliss. For the time being, immediately percolates the body-mind complex, the lake called body-mind complex. And we feel tremendous happiness. To forget again in the next moment that it is the desirelessness which allowed the bliss to well up through the body-mind complex. I forget that. I'm not aware of that. Again I chase after desire. Again the disturbance comes. So if I can stop that, I can become dhiraha. No more chasing. To be just composed in your own self. Calm, maintain the calmness. That's the entire sadhana, the practice. Whatever may be the religion. Is there any religion which says that that by fulfillment of the desires are going to happiness? All the religion, whatever may be the language, whatever may be the way of expression, at last they say it is to go beyond the desires where we can find fulfillment. And that fulfillment comes from within. It's not waiting for us somewhere outside. It is here. It has to well up from there. And for that, the filtering factor in the form of desires, that has to be stopped. The mind becomes calm. If I can keep it calm always, then the bliss is always something which that bliss is never actually ceasing. It is not never ceasing. It's only was filtered out. That bliss becomes the permanent factor of our life. And that is being indicated by Nirantara Akhanda Sukhanubhuti Sada Eka Rupaha. There's no transformation. It being the Purana Purusha. Thus again that same idea is being reiterated by saying Sada Eka Purusha. He is the only being who is appearing as the universe. He is the only being, the non-dual conscious principle. In any way is beyond all transformation. Because he exists, everything appears to exist. So that's the idea with Sada Eka Rupa. And Pratibodha Matra. How to know him? That he is behind each and every state of our consciousness. This Pratibodha Matra, this word is, we find its reference again in this Kena Upanishad, the very fourth verse of the second chapter. What is mentioned there? Pratibodha viditang matam amritatvam hi vindate. That the Brahman is known well when it is known as the witness of every state of consciousness. That in whatever state I may be, whatever I am thinking, whatever I am feeling, behind each and every thought, behind each and every feeling, the conscious principle is there as the witness. Pratibodha. For each and every. Why it is being spoken of in these terms? Because again it speaks of tatastha lakshana. That that if you say that consciousness which you are saying is the innermost core of our being, can you show it to me? No, it cannot be shown. Then how do I know it? Because you find that the way you know the external world, you can know the same way your body-mind complex. I witness it, I know this. The way I am witnessing the external world, I witness this. So this speaks of illumination. This speaks of knowledge. I know the external world, I know my body-mind complex, I know my mind, I know my body. So knowledge speaks of illumination. When something is illumined, there must be a source of illumination. Then you say, show it to me. It cannot be shown. Just the way I cannot show you the light. Only when the light illumines an object, the object being illumined, I can infer the existence of light. No one has seen light. Only when it illumines an object, I become aware of light. No one has seen gravity. By seeing a falling object, I become aware of the gravity. No one has seen magnetism. By seeing the movement of the iron filings around an iron bar, I become aware of magnetism. So here this pratibodha viditam also means that behind each and every state of consciousness, the self must be there. Otherwise, how can I be aware of all my thoughts, feelings, of all my activities? So something must be illuminating it. I cannot know it because it is something which is fundamental. But its action, that's the tatastha lakshana. Just that in the scriptures, they use certain allegory to find this, express this idea. That suppose a river is flowing nearby my house, and someone visits my house, and I just say him, the river is very near to my house. He says, where it is? Cannot see it. Well, it is not visible, but can you see the tall tree? Yes, it is just flowing by the side of the tree. By the trees or just on the bank of that river. So that is tatastha, that I cannot see the river from my house. It is very near, but there is a tall tree on its bank. By pointing to the tree, I indicate the existence of the river by its side. So similarly here, by seeing this illumined body-mind complex, by seeing the illumination of each and every state of my existence through each and every thought, through each and every vritti, there must be someone who is illuminating that. So that's the idea of pratibodha, this pratibodha rupa. So that's being indicated there. It is pratibodha matra. It is ultimate source of illumination, because of which everything is illumined. Yena ishita vak asava charanti. Asava means the vital forces. Vak means the organ of speech. So by organ of speech, all the organs of perception as well as of action. And by asava, it means all the vital forces. So everything is functioning because of it, ishita, by its command, as if by its command. It's not someone who has to command, as we were saying, that he holds such an authority, supreme authority. By his mere presence, everyone is working properly. So that's the idea of the word ishita. So that's what is being spoken of in the 131st verse. And Sri Ramakrishna indicates this. His parables we always take into consideration, because at last we will find that our words, we use so much of words, but Sri Ramakrishna, just by a very simple example, makes the entire thing very clear. What he's saying? That if you go on adding zero after zero, it has no value. And then in front of all the zero you add one, and then its value, it becomes a big value. Not only that, if you now go on adding zero, its value goes on increasing. So what he's saying, the self is that one. Everything else is that zero. Because of the existence of the self, everything as if has certain value. In absence of the self, they are all as if beyond any existence. They are as non-existent. Because of the self, everything becomes existent. So it's just the same example again we can give. It's just like the fire, because of which all the potatoes are jumping in the frothing water, in the boiling water. So now where to look for the self? Where to look for the self? That you say the self everything is doing. Is it something outside or something within? Where to find that self? So that is being stated in the next verse, the 132nd verse. So where to look for the self? Atraiva. So this is very important word, here. So in Vedanta, again and again they will indicate that the ultimate reality is not something which has to be found in extraterrestrial, outside this universe. Here, in the core of your being, atra eva, atraiva, sattvatmani, dhi guhayam, avyakrita akasha, akasha uchchai ravivat prakashate, swatejasha, vishwamidam prakashayan. So just like as the sun is illuminating the entire universe, know it for certain, actually it is not the sun. It is the self, which is the innermost core of your being, which illumines the buddhi, dhi guhayam. It is as if hidden in the cavity of your buddhi, dhi. And it illumines your buddhi, and through that, once the buddhi is illumined by the self, it in turn illumines the entire universe. And the words which are being used here is very interesting. What it is saying, atraiva sattvatmani. It is of the nature of sattva. Sattva here means illumination. As we know, sattva is illumination. This ultimate reality is of the nature of illumination. Sattva atmani. Atmani is used the essence. Anything's essence is atma. So sattva atmani, the one's essence is sattva, is illumination. So this self which is lying here is of the nature of illumination. Where it is lying, dhi guhayam, in the cavity of your dhi, of the buddhi. Where? Avyakrita akasha. So now we will find Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya is differentiating akasha into two types of akasha. One is avyakrita akasha and other is vyakrita akasha. Avyakrita means undifferentiated space. Akasha means space, undifferentiated space. And the external space which you are seeing is a differentiated space, because here all the objects which are having name and form is there without. And there is a space within which is beyond all sorts of name and form, differentiation. It is undifferentiated, avyakrita akasha. So there that self is there illuminating the buddhi. And once the buddhi is illuminated, with that the entire world is illuminated. Swatejasha, the self with its own power. Vishwamidam prakashayan, the entire universe is illumined by the power of the self. And then an allegory it is saying, just like the way the sun illumines the world. So now naturally the question comes, is sun illuminating the world or it is the self? Now let us try to understand with the help of an allegory. So you know the projector? We all know the projector. How the projector works? So there is a constant source of light, a very extremely powerful light, which through the lens of the projector is being projected to the screen. Now if there is some input of some video or some image, this light will be magnifying, magnifying and projecting this image, the input image, through the lens to the external screen. So that's the very basic principle of any projector. That in a small laptop, I am viewing something that what I am viewing that as an input I provide to the projector. The projector has a source of light, with the help of which this is projecting this image or this video in the larger, you can say the external in the larger screen. So now here let us try to understand what is avyakrita space and what is this differentiated space. Now inside the projector, what is this? There is a light, and the light falls on the image, the input image to be projected out. So the light which is falling on the image to be projected out through the lens as that magnified thing. So that light till it falls on the image. Does that light have any differentiation? No. It is undifferentiated. That light, the moment it falls on the image, now when it is being projected through the lens to the screen, it gets differentiated into the whatever I am seeing in the picture. The white light, the same white light passing through the lens, through the input image and the lens, is being projected out. So take this example as an allegory. So similarly, the dhi, the buddhi, is something like that, the lens of the projector, the input, the mind. What the mind is doing, the mind is like the input. So whatever I am seeing, that example which we give, when I am seeing a red flower, the mind, what it does, it will perceive the redness at certain color perception center, its texture in certain other center, its smell in some other center, and it will synthesize all of them to create a whole and present it to the buddhi. So the input, the mind is the input that is presenting it to the buddhi. The buddhi, now what is this? Now the self, which is illumining the buddhi, what it is doing, what is projected to the buddhi, this way, by illumined by this self, that is again projected as the external world. What I am seeing in the outside is not something what I am perceiving. Sorry. What I am seeing is actually what I am projecting. What I am projecting, that's what I am seeing. This external world is nothing but the projection of the mind, of the buddhi, being illumined by the self. So now you will understand. Sorry. Now you will understand this allegory. Just the self within, when it is illuminating the buddhi, that cavity is avyakrita, undifferentiated. And when the mind now, as an input, presents something to the buddhi, that gets projected as the external world. So now you will understand that the sun, when it is illuminating the world, this illumined world by the sun is something which is the input of the mind to the buddhi. So this illumined world I cannot see unless the self is there. This illumined world itself is an input. The mind is giving it as an input to the buddhi. And then the self is illuminating it. So because of the self, I can know the existence of the sun, which is illuminating the world. This world appears as vyakrita, as something which is projected in the form of name and form. So now you will understand this external vyakrita world is because of that avyakrita space through which the self is illuminating the buddhi to find as expression of the external world. So in short, we can say what? That if we take an imaginary projector, when the projector is on but not displaying any content, the screen is lit up by white light coming from inside the projector's cavity. It is only when the image or video is fed into the projector that this white light illuminates and displays the image or the video on the screen. That's the thing we were saying. So in this analogy, there are two distinct spaces. One inside the projector's cavity where the white light remains undifferentiated, and the other is outside where the image or the video is projected. So now take this as a comparison of this white light, which represents the self. The white light represents the self, the projector represents the buddhi, and the image or video input represents the mind. If the mind does not present any content to the buddhi projects only the undifferentiated light of the self. That happens in samadhi. When the mind has stopped working, you see everything as consciousness and consciousness alone. However, when the mind presents sensory information to the buddhi, the light of the self illumines that information, projecting it as the differentiated universe of this name and form. So thus the space within the buddhi, always illuminated by the self, is undifferentiated. So till the mind is giving the input, it is undifferentiated. So just like we took the example of the projector to understand that within the buddhi, the self is there, the space there is a vyakrita, that self is undifferentiated self there. Now it's getting associated with the buddhi, that buddhi which is already fed by the mind. The mind again is being fed through the senses of this external world, and then as an input to the projector, to the buddhi. It is being fed, and then the self is projecting what is being fed in this, what is being fed as an input in that projector as this external world. So it is the self and self alone which is being projected as this external world. Of Vyakrita, the undifferentiated light, is coming out as a differentiated light. In a more simple way, we can say that the dhi is like the prism. One side of the prism is the white light. So one side of the prism is the avyakrita space where the white light is there. It is yet to be differentiated. The other side of the prism is the vyakrita space. So once it passes through the prism, it breaks into the spectrum of this world of name and form. So if you have to find the self, you have to find it beyond the dhi. Not that you can point it out. You can infer its existence, because that's the ultimate source of illumination, because of which everything is illuminated. From the dhi, from starting from the buddhi to all the objects which I see in this external world, everything is being illuminated. So that's the idea which has been spoken of here. We can again continue with this 132nd verse with a further more elaboration to continue with other perspectives from which the self has been defined by the teacher to the student. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.